Somewhere in America right now, a company you have never heard of owns the legal right to collect a debt you barely remember. They paid 3 cents for every dollar they're about to demand from you. And if you pay them even a fraction of what they paid, they still walk away with a profit. That is not a scam. That is a completely legal, multi-billion-dollar industry. And today, we're going to build one from scratch. Okay, so you want to own a debt collection agency. No factory, no land, no inventory sitting in a warehouse depreciating. Just a phone, a list of names, and a legal right to ask people for money they already agreed to pay someone else. It sounds almost too simple to be a real business. Here's what that simplicity is hiding. A single compliance mistake that can bankrupt you overnight. A federal regulator with the power to freeze your accounts. And a business model where the actual product you're buying and selling is other people's financial desperation. This is one of the strangest businesses in America, because unlike almost every other business we've covered, the barrier to entry here isn't money. It's paperwork. By the end of this, you'll understand exactly how this industry actually works and why so few people who start one ever make real money. Before the numbers, we need to define what debt collection agency actually means, because it covers two genuinely different businesses with completely different economics. The first is contingency collection, sometimes called third-party collection. In this model, you don't own the debt at all. A hospital, a credit card company, or a small business hires you to chase down money they're owed, and you earn a commission, typically 25 to 50% of whatever you actually recover. If you collect nothing, you earn nothing. The second model, the one that generates the eye-popping numbers you may have heard about, is debt buying. In this model, you don't work for the original creditor at all. You buy the debt outright, permanently, for pennies on the dollar. And then everything you manage to collect after that is yours. This is the model behind names like Encore Capital and Portfolio Recovery Associates, the two largest players in this industry. Companies that together have purchased the rights to collect over $200 billion in defaulted consumer debt. This script is going to walk through both models, because most agencies actually start in the first one and dream of graduating into the second. The starting cost, and this is where this business breaks every pattern from the businesses we've covered before. A ranch needs $10 million in land. A driving range needs $500,000 in netting and irrigation. A debt collection agency, in its leanest form, a single person working from a home office with a laptop and a phone, can be started for somewhere between $1,500 and $5,500. Read that again. That number covers business registration, basic licensing, a website, and a modest marketing budget. If you want to scale into a real operation with staff and multi-state licensing, budget climbs to somewhere between $50,000 and $75,000, still a fraction of what it costs to open a driving range. So why doesn't everyone do this? Because the actual barrier to entry isn't capital. It's regulation, and the regulation in this industry is aggressive, expensive, and unforgiving in a way that most first-time owners badly underestimate. The licensing maze, the part that quietly filters out most people who try this. You cannot simply decide to collect debt and start dialing. Most states require a formal debt collection agency license, and you need one in every single state where the people who owe money actually live, not where your office is. On top of that license, most states require you to post a surety bond, essentially a financial guarantee that you'll follow the rules. And those bonds range wildly depending on the state, from $5,000 in some places up to $50,000, and in a handful of states, as high as $300,000. You also have to register with the Federal Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, the agency that oversees this entire industry, and you need full compliance training on the Fair Debt Collection Practices Act, the federal law that dictates exactly what you can and cannot say to someone who owes money, down to specific rules about what can and cannot appear on the outside of an envelope you mail them. Add a collection management software system to track thousands of accounts simultaneously, telephony systems with mandatory call recording, skip tracing tools to actually locate people who've moved or changed their number, and payment processing infrastructure. And your technology stack alone can run $1,000 to $5,000 just to get functional, climbing significantly higher as you scale. The operating costs. And here's where the business quietly starts looking like a call center wearing a suit. If you're running a real operation with employees, rather than working solo from home, payroll becomes your largest ongoing cost by far. Because you need trained collectors who understand both the psychology of getting someone to pay and the legal minefield of what they're allowed to say while doing it. One wrong sentence on a recorded call, one threat that crosses a legal line, one contact made at a time of day the law prohibits, and that single call can become a lawsuit. Add compliance and legal costs, typically $1,000 to $5,000 a month for an operation of any real size, because you need ongoing legal review of your scripts, your letters, and your practices to stay ahead of a regulatory environment that changes constantly. Add errors and omissions insurance, essential in an industry where a single mishandled account can trigger federal litigation. Office costs if you're not fully virtual. And the working capital every source on this business insists you budget for, $10,000 to $20,000 minimum, because revenue in this business is wildly inconsistent while you build a client base and wait for collections to actually convert into cash. The revenue model, and this is where the two versions of this business genuinely diverge. In the contingency model, the math is refreshingly simple. Say you're a solo operator working from home in your first year, collecting around $10,000 a month for clients. At an average commission rate of 35%, that's $3,500 a month in revenue, or roughly $42,000 for the year. Because your overhead is minimal, working from home with no staff, your profit margin can run as high as 90%, meaning most of that revenue is actual profit. It's a real business, but it's closer to a solo consulting income than an empire. The debt buying model is a different animal entirely. Say a debt buyer purchases a portfolio of defaulted credit card accounts with a combined face value of $1 million for a typical price of 2 to 5 cents on the dollar. That's an acquisition cost of $20,000 to $50,000 for the right to collect on the full million. If that buyer manages to recover even 15% of the face value through negotiated settlements, payment plans, and litigation, a completely realistic recovery rate in this industry, that's $150,000 collected against a $50,000 purchase price, before subtracting the cost of the call center staff, the legal notices, and the litigation required to actually extract that money. This is why the largest player in this industry, Encore Capital, generates roughly $1.5 billion in annual revenue buying exactly this kind of debt at scale. And why in a single recent quarter, the industry's largest buyers reported collecting 20% more than the year before, more than they'd ever collected in company history. Now here's where it gets genuinely dangerous. And this is the risk that makes this business fundamentally different from every other one we've covered. In a driving range, your biggest threat is weather. In this business, your biggest threat is the federal government, and it has already demonstrated exactly what it's willing to do. In 2015, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau took direct action against Encore Capital and Portfolio Recovery Associates, the two largest companies in this entire industry, for buying debts that were, in the government's own words, potentially inaccurate, lacking documentation, or completely unenforceable. Then pressuring consumers with false statements and generating lawsuits using robo-signed court documents nobody had actually reviewed. The penalty wasn't a warning. Both companies were ordered to refund millions of dollars directly to consumers and completely overhaul how they operate. That's what happened to the two biggest, best-funded companies in the space. A small agency making the same mistakes doesn't survive an action like that. It simply ceases to exist. Beyond regulatory risk, there's the debt itself, commonly called zombie debt in this industry, because it keeps getting resold from one buyer to another, sometimes years after the original account went bad, sometimes with incomplete records of who actually owes what. Buying a portfolio of unclear or poorly documented accounts isn't just a collection problem, it's a lawsuit waiting to happen. Because the Fair Debt Collection Practices Act gives consumers the right to sue you directly, and if they win, you pay their attorney's fees on top of whatever else you owe. And then there's the simplest risk of all. You never actually know what a portfolio of debt is truly worth until you try to collect it. Firms that overpay for a batch of accounts or underestimate how difficult they'll be to collect don't slowly struggle. They go under. Because the math only works if your recovery rate clears your acquisition cost plus your operating expenses. And there's no way to know that number in advance with certainty. So who actually wins in this business? Almost never the individual operator dreaming of buying a debt portfolio on day one. The agencies that survive long-term almost always start in the lower-risk contingency model, working for clients rather than owning the debt themselves. Building a track record and a compliance system that doesn't generate lawsuits before ever considering the leap into buying debt outright. The companies that dominate the debt buying side of this industry, Encore Capital, Portfolio Recovery Associates, and Resurgent Capital Services, got there through massive scale, sophisticated predictive analytics that estimate a portfolio's true collectability before they ever bid on it, and enough capital to absorb the inevitable bad portfolios and regulatory settlements along the way. This is not a business where the small independent operator quietly outperforms the giants. It's a business where scale is almost the entire game, because the fixed costs of compliance, legal defense, and technology barely change whether you're managing 1,000 accounts or 1,000,000, which means the giant's cost per account keeps shrinking while a small operator stays painfully high. Let's put real numbers next to two scenarios for a modest contingency agency with a small staff, 3 collectors, and a compliance-focused manager. The good year, you land 2 solid healthcare and telecom clients who send you a steady, predictable flow of accounts. Your collectors maintain a healthy recovery rate, and you avoid any compliance complaints. You collect on behalf of clients a combined $1.2 million across the year. At an average commission of 35%, that's $420,000 in revenue. Your operating costs, payroll for 3 collectors and a manager, compliance and legal review, software, and insurance run around $300,000. Net profit for the year, a genuinely solid $120,000. The bad year, one of your collectors, under pressure to hit targets, makes a call outside legally permitted hours and uses language that crosses a line the FDCPA doesn't allow. The consumer's attorney files suit, even though you settle rather than fight it in court. Legal defense and the settlement itself cost you $70,000. Word spreads in a small industry, and one of your 2 major clients quietly moves their accounts to a competitor with a cleaner compliance record, cutting your collectible volume by 1/3. You collect only $800,000 for clients across the year, generating $280,000 in commission revenue. Your operating costs barely move, still around $290,000 once you include the legal settlement. Net result, a loss of roughly $10,000 and a compliance scar that follows your business for years. The swing between those 2 years is $130,000. And unlike every other business we've studied, it wasn't caused by weather, competition, or the economy. It was caused by a single phone call. So, does owning a debt collection agency make sense? The honest answer is that this is the strangest business we've covered. Because the barrier that keeps most people out isn't the cost of getting in. It's genuinely small. It's the discipline required to survive the regulatory environment once you're inside. The people who make real money here are almost never the ones chasing the dramatic debt-buying model you read about in the news. They're the disciplined operators who treat compliance as the actual product they're selling, because a clean legal record is the only thing that lets you keep operating long enough for the commission math to eventually add up. The fantasy of buying $1 million of debt for pennies and getting rich collecting it is real. And a handful of massive companies have built genuine empires doing exactly that. The reality for almost everyone else who tries is a business that looks nearly free to start and turns out to be one of the most expensive mistakes in America the moment you get the compliance wrong. The people who succeed here understood, before they made a single call, that they weren't really in the business of collecting money. They were in the business of not getting sued while trying to collect it, and they built their entire operation around that one uncomfortable truth.